to another Just 5 Min. So what have we got today? Zuplo. Yeah. What is that? Well, first of all, there's way too many unicorns going on, but they just seem to be there. So anyway, moving on. So Zuplo, API gateways. Yeah, really something to get excited about. But it really is, especially these days with the world of APIs connecting things and all the rest of it. Um, so for quite a long time, actually, I've been using Azure API Gateway Management. Okay, and that's so. Well, first of all, what is an API gateway? Well, in simple terms, it basically is a service that sits between whatever's consuming your API. So like a set of services you might write to do, I don't know, get me the current weather in, wherever. So you could, whatever your API does. Okay. So obviously, unless that API is like an internal API to a company, and even then there's probably things like security and things like rate limiting. But if that API is public facing, and you might be writing that for your own application, you might be writing a mobile app, you might be writing a web app, um, whatever it might be, or you might be offering it out to the wider world. Okay, so when people come on and hit your API, they're accessing it, fine, not a problem, but you've got to think about, have you got authentication, authorization? Um, do you need to make sure people sign up first? Do you want to monetize that API? All these questions, and one of the big ones, of course, is you need to maybe employ rate limiting. In other words, so you don't get crazy bots or even naughty people wanting to hit your API with millions of requests to basically try to take down your API. So that's where an API gateway comes in. There's a lot of other factors involved there, a lot of other layers to it, but in a simple but rambling way, that's what it is. So Azure API gateway, great if you're invested in the Azure sort of infrastructure and whatnot. Again, the other big cloud providers have this sort of feature, as do, I'm sure, and I haven't really looked, but I'm sure there's lots of other services. But Zuplo, and I should put a little, and I will put a link. I was listening to a Scott Hanselman from Microsoft, Hansel Minutes, where I got this from, and it was a great interview with one of the guys behind it. Apparently, used to work on the Azure API Gateway back in the day, a long time ago. Um, did a small stint at Stripe, but what's come out of that, before we get into it, is the documentation for this. It's very Stripe-esque. So it's really easy to get started, really easy to get going. So anyway, so they are a service. Zuplo is an API gateway serverless service, so you don't have to worry about where it is or whatever. But if you've got an API, you can put Zuplo in front of it like a proxy, basically, and it will handle things like auth and access management. It's got rate limiting, so that what I mentioned before, you can control that. You can actually there's aspects of monetization of that, so you can monetize your API. Okay, there's quite a lot of good information on this, but ultimately, to save you having to worry about, okay, I've got this brilliant API that does X, Y, Z, you can use something like Zuplo to secure that. They do have a programmable layer of an abstraction between the API and whatever's consuming it. So you can control the policy of who gets what, blah, 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 all the rate limiting stuff. It's got a really nice interface to use. There are, like I said, where you're sort of going. But the other thing as well, sorry, is the fact that they handle deploying to the edge. So in other words, again, it can be a bit sort of a bit like a CDN, like a content delivery network. So you've got access wherever your API is getting access, in Japan, in India, in America, in Europe, wherever. But that rate limiting gets sort of applied across that whole edge, which is really quite clever. So there's a lot of good stuff that it's doing if you've got an API. You can start free. I'm not affiliated with these guys, but the pricing is pretty reasonable anyway. But you can certainly start free. They've got a free sort of developer individual account. You can get up to 100,000 requests a month, up to 1 gig egress, meaning coming in, going out rather. Ingress is coming in, isn't it? Goodness me. So basically, there's a free version. Even when you go up to the builder version, which has got custom domains and all those things, it's about $25 a month. So it's not the end of the world. Yes, when you start going up to like an enterprise level, you get up to like things like $500 a month. But I think you're up there in a main enterprisey type level to get to that cost. But for free, brilliant, So I think it's definitely worth having a look at. And that's what I've got for this time around. So hopefully you find it interesting, or not, as the case may be. But either way, I will bid you a fond farewell, and hopefully you have a good weekend and the rest of the week, and we'll catch you on the next one.